And then he said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills.
I can't catch a break, guys.
Yeah.
Get them the fuck away from me. I can't be around those guys.
People think, oh, well, cleaning your room, that's just a cliche. It's like, yeah, really, eh? Just go ahead and try it.
If people had any idea how powerful sleep is for healing from anything, and the fact that it's free.
My mind is absolutely bulletproof, solid as a rock.
Podcast. Welcome to the Fight and Fit Show. It's been a wee while since we had our last podcast. Brian was away on holidays, Stephen was away on holidays, and they are just back today. So we're going to get into it with sitting is the new smoking. Brandon, take it away.
Right, guys. So sitting is the new smoking. I'm sure you have heard of this. If you haven't, you're probably like, oh my goodness, I haven't heard that. What a catchy and enjoyable soundbite. So one of the reasons that sitting is the new smoking is because it's it's a scourge. People aren't as active as they used to be. Sitting is now where we spend the vast majority of our time, and it's an amazing position if you are tired, but it's not optimal biomechanically for our body. What you give your body, it will adapt to and change to. And athletes now these days are, stricken with flattened, laminated glutes. We're literally just sitting on our glutes the whole day, literally compressing them. Our hamstrings are getting shorter. Our pec minor is starting to, again, get used to this shortened position. Our traps are starting to shorten and hunch, and our spine is sitting in a constant state of flexion. There's no real stable position for your pelvis. You're either anteriorly tilted, which is, fine. This is actually pretty good, but it's hard work. And eventually people normally deviate into a posterior tilt where that lower back curves underneath. Chris adjusting his posture accordingly. And so, again, when you spend time in positions like this chronically, they're going to have issues. And so what issues are we seeing with athletes again and again? You're starting to see people with, not starting to see, I'm sure coaches for years have been seeing it now, issues in the traps, issues in the shoulder, issues in the hip, issues with knees, issues with back, sciatica, bulging discs are things that constantly come up for me. And I'm sure, maybe Chris, I know you're a little bit skeptical about today's podcast, but I'm sure these are patterns that you see in the gym consistently.
Yeah, no, 100%. Basically, what I see is an anterior pelvic tilt due to short and tight hip flexors and inability to extend at the hip, and instead they will extend at the lower back instead, which causes loads of back pain and inactive glutes, which leads to back problems and back injuries and less power and less overall confidence and athleticism when it comes to moving heavy weight.
Yeah, and so again, when we don't have the ability to express ourselves in these archetypal positions, what do? Compensate. And compensating, the general rule of thumb with a compensation is you're probably going to use a joint as opposed to a muscle. The muscle is weak, joints are strong, and so therefore it makes sense to load the joint and generate a lot of force, because that's probably, if you're trying to be athletic, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to generate a lot of force, but you're not really asking yourself the question is, should I be generating lots of force? It's like, well, of course you should. You're an athlete and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, are you? Well, what have you done to earn that title of athlete? Oh, well, I train, X, Y, or Z times a week. It's like, yes, okay, but how specifically have you paid attention to the, your knee, hip, back, shoulder function particularly, or are you just showing up and playing the game and expressing yourself? And so again, who yourself is as an athlete is actually somebody who is a victim of sitting. It's like, because again, nobody gave you the choice. Hey, when you showed up in primary school, do you want to sit cross-legged all day? Do you want to squat and preserve your hip and lower back function? Sorry. Or would you like a chair?
I'm just imagining like an evil armchair with a mustache. Just like going around inviting people to sit down all day.
But again, this is essentially what's happening, is that if you're sitting down all day, you are going to adapt, and it's starting young. I was training a team of kids, I think they were maybe 8, 9, and 10, and it was actually very, very interesting. I had them for 4 weeks. We were doing football every Saturday, and we started off with a dynamic warm-up. Me being the movement coach that I am, it was obviously quite movement-based and, quite mobility-based and this kind of stuff. And again, a lot like mobility, like squats, but squats with good form and paying attention to things that should be paid attention to, foot position, knee position in relationship to their torso, that kind of stuff. And like the mobility in 8, 9, and 10-year-olds was terrible. Like you'd get one outlier, one or two outliers who are pretty decent movers, and everybody else like absolutely bandy. And
they're usually dancers or gymnasts.
Well, again, these were all lads, and to my knowledge, none of them were dancers and none of them were gymnasts. Like again, for whatever reason, like your friend Tiernan, who again can sit cross-legged full lotus, like for no good reason. And again, maybe there is a reason, maybe the break dancers. I don't know. But generally speaking, it's like some people are really good in a sense of.
In regards to that, if Tiernan's listening to this, since he was real young, if he's sitting playing video games, he'll sit in an armchair and he'll sit in full lotus like the whole time. Like, it's not like it's not like that position's new to him. Like he's in that, and like he used to show off because he'd cross his legs, he'd go up onto his knees and like walk around his knees.
Yeah, cool. There you go. Yes, yeah, interesting.
So he kept that. He kept that the whole time.
Yeah, and so this is it. Yeah, very interesting. So use it or lose it. And so again, it would be great to encourage kids, even through games and sports and all that kind of stuff, to retain these moves, because again, as I said, you lose it. Now, here's the really interesting thing. I had them for 4 weeks. There was a stark difference between week 1 and week 2 and week 2 and week 3 and week 4 and week 1 was just non-comparable. And the reason being is that these kids hadn't fully adapted yet. Like they were still in the early stages. Their muscles were still supple and pliable and all this kind of stuff. Now, again, if you exaggerate that on 20, 30 years, nobody showed the kids the basic movements. They hadn't been practicing them, and they were literally just, being busy human beings, going to school, getting an education, going home, doing their homework, going out to play for an hour, maybe 2 hours. Like, what else are they doing? It's like going over to their friends. And so, again, there's not, then you go to secondary school, you're doing more sitting, you're doing more homework. And again, possibly doing sports. Some people just aren't into sports, which is, fair enough. Some sports, like boxing for us, is like have no, or again, maybe it's different now. And again, everybody responds to things differently. But, some sports have absolutely zero to very little focus on mobility. And so again, time spent attentively devoting, making sure each individual athlete develops their range of motion over a period of time and understanding why that's important. Is like, well, then these people are just going to be victims, and then they're going to be, 30 years of age, maybe just late 20s. I've always had a bad back. My left knee's killing me. My shoulder's just always giving me grief. And so again, it's like, well, what is the solution? Or again, I suppose just first thing I would just like to say, that in my opinion is a massive problem. I did a slight bit of research as well, just beforehand. So what other issues are there with sitting, and why do I have such a gripe against it as I sit here in this chair? So increased risk of chronic diseases. So prolonged sitting has been linked to increased risk of chronic health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and certain types of cancer. Now, again, I don't know about cancer and all this kind of stuff, but again, lack of activity is terrible for you. I'm sure people know that now. We're designed to move, and just sitting here and storing up food and chemicals and all this kind of stuff and not burning, and not being someone who actively purges the system and charges it up and flushes it out and moves is not good. All right. Though it's a very interesting thing. I'm not sure how true it is, but again, take it with a pinch of salt. You can do a little bit of research yourself. And your man was saying it was well regarded as a health expert, let's say. And one of the things that he was saying is that if you're a smoker, and I'm by no means encouraging people to smoke or vape, but if you are a smoker or a vapor and you exercise, you have a better chance of living better health outcomes as somebody who doesn't smoke or doesn't vape and who doesn't exercise. So again, if you're
if you're overweight. If you're just overweight and you exercise,
exactly. So lots of these comorbidities. So these things that multiply your risk of death. If you exercise along with that, you could have a better chance with a comorbidity like smoking or being overweight or chronically not sleeping, all this kind of stuff that we would advise against, as somebody who is looking after themselves physically and by avoiding all these comorbidities, but refuses to exercise and use their body. And again, that's stands a testament to say how important it is that we actually move our body.
Right. Not exercising is incredibly unhealthy for you. It's incredibly unhealthy for you. Sitting is, I would say, like, sitting is the new smoking. Just not exercising is the new smoking. Like, if you're not exercising, you're leaving so much on the table in terms of like how good you feel, how much energy you have throughout the day, how strong you are, and like how motivated you are as well, and your ability to withstand suffering and, let's say, what is it, delayed gratification, all that sort of stuff. It all gets better when you exercise, and it gets even better when you exercise intensely. But the sitting is the new smoking part. One of the reasons why sitting is bad as well is because it will make exercise not feel so nice. Like, if you have really, really tight hip flexors and poor posture, moving feels cranky in your body. Like, it doesn't feel good to move. And that's one of the worst things about it. If you have an injury, or if you have like a niggle or something like that, and you can't sort of fix it, it limits you from exercising. And when you sit all the time, your hip flexors get short and tight. And when the hip flexors get short and tight, it leads to a whole host of postural issues down the line, all stemming from, like, here's how it will sort of work. The hip flexors will get tight. It'll force you into an anterior tilt. The pelvis will tilt forward. When the pelvis tilts forward, you'll have a bias to internally rotate at the knee. That will collapse your arches. And because you're doing that, and you're sticking your chest out, the shoulders will round a little bit forward, and then you'll crank in your neck and you'll look up like this here. And you put lots of pressure on your neck, on your lumbar spine, on the inside of your shoulders, so that when your shoulders are like this and they're internally rotated like mad, you can't really press overhead. You're limited in that regard. And then when you do go to finally exercise, you're at way bigger risk of all these other injuries that will be due to stacking on your joints instead of stacking on the muscles.
So I think it's very clear that sitting is the new smoking. And so this is the whole reason why I just wanted to kind of open this up and have a conversation about it today, because the amount of people that have shoulder issues that we deal with no, so again, generally there's two reasons why people get injured. Generally, is one is an accident, so they have a fall, a trip, a bang, a crash, a collision, sport related, whatever, and then the other one is overtension. And so again, just over time, the system just kind of gets wound up and wound up and wound up. And it's not an issue. You don't really feel anything until one day all of a sudden becomes an issue. Or again, maybe it's just something you just kind of have to shrug and do a bit of stretching, a few reps, just loosen that, get a bit of blood flow, and then things are fine until one day that just doesn't do anymore. And so one thing that would be massively beneficial is for people, if you do long periods of sitting, is like to have an understanding of what the to have an understanding of what the issue actually is. So again, we went through them. Let's talk about them again briefly. And so again, we're talking tight hamstrings, short glute, tight hip flexors, interior rotated shoulders, and short traps. They're the big ones. Posterior tilted pelvis as well.
Yeah.
All right. So what would you really need? Like, you might just need 5 positions to get away from. So again, like, you've got this standing pec stretch or standing doorway pec stretch, a simple narrow hamstring stretch. You're reaching down, touching your toes, a low lunge. What else we got? A pigeon stretch, and maybe an upward dog. And it's like, that's literally it. And so through all those, if you were to just do those regularly after long periods of sitting, depending on who you are and what issues you have, you've got big rounded shoulders, the standing doorway stretch, or maybe even just overhead at a doorway, should be something that you do all the time. All the time. If you have a bad back and you know that you sit with your lower back dumped against the chair in your car, it's like, after long periods of driving, doing a low lunge, doing an upward dog, and maybe taking a little child's pose off just to rinse off as well. Again, everybody could probably do it a pigeon pose. Everybody could probably do it a toe touch, unless, again, you're somebody who's responded very well to sitting and you're just super flexible still. And again, maybe that's because of your history with dancing or X, Y, or Z. Who knows? Maybe you just like to, stretch yourself. I don't know.
I do think it's important to note as well that some people, like there is this thing called genetic variability, and everyone is different, and some people are more flexible than others, and some people are more tight than others as well. In general, people who are hypermobile don't have these same issues, but their issues come from a lack of stability, and they'll still stack on the joints, but they'll stack on the joints because they can't generate that stability from the muscles instead. So I think that's also important to know. And that someone who's not, let's say, hypermobile, someone who's more rigid and dense and like tight and stiff, they have like an awful sort of journey to sort of teach their body how to express that new range of motion. Because when you're trying to open up the body, it's not just about like stretching muscle, you're stretching fascia, you're basically like getting through knots. You have to teach your nervous system how to actually even contract in those positions. Like one of the big realizations I had when I was trying to open up my shoulders and open up my hips is the cramping that you get from a weak muscle trying to contract in a position that I was not used to. So like, let's say you have your arm out like this and you just reach it out to the side and you're like, oh, okay, that's fine. But you roll your shoulder on your back and you pull it back even further and you got your rear delt just switching on going, ah! And when that's switched on, Joe, you might even feel it down your lower back on the other side because that's to stabilize up the chain to make sure that nothing's wobbling. And then to be spazzing out because you just never expressed that before. And just teaching your body how to contract in that position will help too.
Yeah. Something I was talking about somebody quite recently, and they were talking about the whole idea that they say in, maybe it's a yoga thing, but it's definitely something I've heard before, is trauma lives in your hips.
Mm-hmm.
What
trauma? All right, like think about it this way, right? If you're actually genuinely scared, okay. If I was like let's say I was to give you a jump scare, so I jump in the door, okay. The first thing that contracts is your pelvic floor. Pelvic goes like, Joe, and that tenses up like that there, and then you hold that tension to imagine you're actually scared.
That's why you shit yourself.
Yeah, maybe. But just
imagine, we're running with it.
Imagine holding that tension because you're perpetually scared for, let's say, like 45 minutes because there's a big argument going on around the house or something stupid like that there. So you're sitting there like a little scared kid, and you tense up. You know, like again, when you're tense, you're literally tensed up, and then you tend to like restrict and contract. Like there's like when you want to make yourself smaller, everything curls in like this here into the fetal position. And when you want to like expand and grow, everyone gets big like this here. But when you're scared and you're tense and you're afraid, you get closer into the fetal position to make yourself smaller. And I think that happens at the hips. That happens like in the
also exactly.
Muscles.
What about living in a perpetual state of fight or flight because again you're traumatized, or again you're going through periods of high stress? Well, now what's one of the things to talk about with when you're stressed is like you clench your jaw. And so again, if your nervous system is in a fight or flight response, is like, well, you're going to be tense in general. And so just like when you're doing muscle contractions specifically, you want to tense your glutes and you want to tense your thing. But let's say again, passively, again, you're sitting in a seated position, or you're retracted into the fetal position for whatever reason. If you are tense and stressed, well, then you're going to be what I would, merit a guess and say a poor, quote unquote, a poor responder to sitting. Is you're going to be a tight person, one of these people who are, very, very tight, very, very tense, and have issues with mobility and all this kind of stuff because it's coming from stress. Because you're a stressed out person, you're literally have this unknowing tension in your body, like literally in your nervous system, that affects all your muscles and your joints and that kind of crack. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think stress is a big factor, but I think a lack of sleep is a bigger factor in that. I think like if you're way underslept,
a bigger factor.
Well, like a bigger underlying factor. I think the reason why people would be more stressed or have higher stress responses and be more chronically stressed is due to sleep. Like if me and you have an argument, but I'm like, well, slept. Okay, I have a really, really good sleep. I mean, you have an argument. I like the time it takes me to come down from that stress is like way quicker than if I'm underslept. I'll be like, well, sitting stressed about it the whole day. Like my ability to regulate those things is drastically different.
I agree, but I also think that if you are also somebody who's traumatized, if you're somebody who is, sensitive, if you're somebody who has a history of and a certain outlook and philosophy in the world because of, X, Y, or Z happening when you're younger, well, then you're also going to respond to little things and issues in a completely different way. And it could be, that everything brings you back to this kind of state or mood because you've never really let it go and this kind of stuff. And I agree, but I suppose it doesn't really, in my opinion, matter what the cause is, but I feel like, again, the issue is how you're responding to stuff is going to have a direct impact on your musculature and your joints and your bones and all this kind of stuff because, you're just a big wound up mess, possibly, and maybe through no fault of your own.
Do you know what else I think is a big cause of it as well? I'm only after realizing. Remember going into, let's say, fifth year. Remember how big your bag used to get? And how heavy it used to be.
Like literally bigger than me.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what you used to be able to do? I'm sure people listening to this are young enough to remember in recent years, in the last 20 years, I'm sure it's always the same case. Like, you literally used to be able to kick people in the bag and they'd spin around and fall over because it was so heavy.
Well, you're the reason for so many traumatized hips.
Or just grab the back of their bag and just gently pull it to the floor.
Yeah, so...
On a separate note, just because I'll never get a chance to bring up the podcast again, or on the last day of school, just grabbing someone's shirt pocket and just ripping off their entire shirt.
Hilarious. Yeah, so yeah, sitting's the new smoking. It's really bad for you. There's a lot of other reasons why it's bad for you as well, like in terms of just not spending energy. You're in like a super sort of lowered state. Like if you're perpetually in a resting state, you will degrade over time. You'll get better and better and better at just doing nothing.
I have some of them, right? So metabolic effects. So when you sit for too long, your body's metabolic rate slows down, which can lead to weight gain and metabolic problems.
Explain that more simply. Instead of I feel like when people start mentioning metabolism to like the layperson, they start making it all fancy in their head. Okay, all it means is that you don't burn as many calories sitting as you do standing. That's all that means by metabolism being slower.
Also, heart and the lungies don't pumpy as quicky, and therefore things don't movie.
Exactly. Like if you're sitting as well, like if you're sitting like this here, and when we're like this, if you can't see us, so sitting forward, hunched over, shoulders rounded, like try and take a full deep breath in this position. It's really, really hard to do. But if you like sit back, chest out, even standing wherever it is, and breathe all the way down from your chest at your belly and let your chest inflate and deflate, you can take in like twice as much oxygen, which is more metabolically active.
Another one, reduced blood flow. Sitting for extended periods can lead to reduced blood flow in your legs, which can increase the risk of blood clots and deep vein thrombosis.
Yeah. So
mental health. Prolonged sitting can also have negative effects on mental health. It may lead to feelings of lethargy, depression, and increased stress.
I know that feeling. See if I sit and play Starfield for 3-4 hours at a time. So it feels like sad.
Feels like sad. And so
the first 2 hours are great though.
One of the things that people talk about is, again, the runner's high, or the great amazing feeling after exercise. It's like, well, sitting for long periods of time is literally the opposite to that. And so again, if you're sitting for long periods of time without moving, the heart pumpy, the lungs breathy, and the endorphins moving around the body, as well as like the lack of physical stress. Like when you have a physical stress, even if it's, and hopefully it's just, mild to moderate, your body's going to give you things so you can tolerate that, and they're called endorphins, and they're literally very similar to morphine. Morphine, endorphins, it's an opiate, so it's along that similar. So it makes you feel good. And when you're sitting down, doing whatever, playing games or just working, it's like you're not getting them unless like you're literally solving problems. Boom, I feel amazing. I made the company €500 and I made myself €300. Boom.
I think it's also important to note that like these are different systems that are being used as well. Like I don't know about like morphine and endorphins and all this sort of stuff, but like dopamine is one. Like you can sit around all day and get a shitload of dopamine. Like you really can, and that can feel really, really good. And that's why like let's say video games can be so addictive, or like people sitting on their computer or I'm sitting on their phone on social media or TikTok, especially because of the novelty and that constant cycle of dopamine. Like that feels really good, and to say it doesn't feel really good is like. So, but you can get bored of it and you can get overstimulated and too much dopamine to the point where like the dopamine hits you're getting are, let's say, not as satisfactory anymore. And because they're not giving you that same sort of kick, well, then nothing is as interesting as all those cool videos. So then you go to do something, everyone just feels kind of like bleh and meh because you don't have that same, novelty. But while that might feel good sitting scrolling for a while, the different like endocrine system that would be used won't be as stimulated, won't be as activated, and you won't get a different cascade of hormones and you'll feel bad, let's say, physically rather than mentally, if that makes sense. And the physical feeling will be like a feedback loop into the mental.
Yeah, so this is it. I mean, like you gotta move. Yeah, you gotta move. I completely agree with what you said. This is it. You gotta move. Like you really have to move. And sitting down and like let's say manufactured sense of creating dopamine as opposed to like social interaction, things that would happen naturally in nature. Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, like if you're watching like Joe, so the worst example of it would be like a compilation of funny videos, where you're watching Joe fail video after fail video after fail video. It's like something happens and instantly another thing happens and instantly another thing happens and instantly another thing happens.
Love it.
When you go out and you go for a walk, like, and you're bored. You're like, where's the stimulus? Where's the exciting, cool stuff going on? It's just not happening. Instead of like slowing everything down, just actually appreciating, the beauty of a tree. Like literally every time I go for a walk, every single time I go for a walk, right? See trees. Trees are like slow motion fractal explosions. And every time I see it, I can't unsee it. I just watch it. I just see this sort of like, it's like upside down lightning.
I always that's interesting. That's a cool way to think about it. I always just look at them like lungs. I just see big sets of lungs just popping out of the ground.
So here's exactly what it is. It's actually the Fibonacci sequence. That's exactly.
I'm aware, but I just it's interesting that you see the Fibonacci sequence represented as lightning. I see it like as obviously your shoulder is like the same distance between the same length between your shoulder is like half the distance between your ulna and your humerus or whatever. And then
I go from the finger, look like from the finger up the arm. So like
exactly
this is half the size of this, and then this and this equals 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 this.
Now you're talking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and it's the same in your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
I was like the big branch comes down in your lungs, and then it breaks up into your bronchioles and your
four splits into
exactly. It's really cool. And so again, when you are conditioned to things now stuff you don't have to think, there's your dopamine, like that's very manufactured and it's very passive, whereas when you have to actively cultivate dopamine through quote unquote real things that aren't in the meta world or on your phone, well then again things are going to be very very it's going to be at a much slower pace, but at the same time when you are sitting, if you didn't have the meta world giving you feedback like that, you would have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only because of this weird thing that we have now, which is amazing and cool, and I love it. It's great. But it's like, unless you were literally talking to somebody or doing a project, sitting on your arse, hunched over like this, like you wouldn't do it all day. And if you were, people would be like, oh Jesus, have you seen Brandon? Something really wrong with him. I don't think he's doing okay at all. It's like, why? Because he literally has sat like this for the last 10 hours. It's a depression. Like it's a picture of depression. Oh, you got the phone. I was looking at a TV. I like you're on the phone. That's even more real now. The head's down. Yeah, jeez. It's very sad indeed. And so again, there is actual studies out there about I think they call them the superposes or whatever like that. It's like hands on your hips, your chest out. It's like you could literally increase dopamine production and apparently testosterone and all this kind of stuff.
I seen that, but I also seen something contradicting it. So I don't know if it's like how much of it is like placebo because you kind of want it to be true, but even if it is placebo, then it kind of works at the same time. But what I would say
it's not even. Yeah, it's not even that I would say it's placebo so much as it's anecdotal. But the more issue is that you definitely do feel better when you're chest up, opened up than you do, unless you. Of course, the idea is that I want to rest now, because again, if you want to enter a rest state, this is not very restful. You know what I mean? And so again,
we're going to talk about Jordan Peterson for the 50 millionth time. And one of the things that he mentions is lobsters. And if you give lobsters amphetamines or serotonin reuptake inhibitors, basically what they do is they stand up straighter, just naturally, unconsciously. There's no sort of like outside people, just do it. They just stand up straighter. And there is a thing it's like a feedback loop in both directions. So if you have like poor pot, like everyone has this tracker this unconscious tracker inside of their mind. And if you are like really, really low on the hierarchy of this like social thing, well, then you feel bad. You feel really, really bad, and it's like a normal thing to feel sort of bad. Some people, when they're depressed, they have like they either have a bad life and they're down in this hierarchy, or their tracker in their brain is like, let's say, messed up a little bit, and they feel like they're lower than they actually are.
Or they're sitting on social media all day and they're looking at people who are doing extremely well, and they're in a habit of comparing themselves to those people, and so obviously you're going to track at the bottom in comparison.
Exactly. But then on top of that as well, like the posture thing, like if you give the lot. Here's the cool thing, and this is going to sound weird to people who don't understand how this sort of stuff works, but like we have the same serotonergic system as lobsters did from like millions and millions of years ago, or whatever. It's based off the same system. So like if you give us like SSRIs or amphetamines or whatever, we'll stand up straighter. If you give lobsters the same thing, they'll stand up straighter because it works off the same system. Okay, it's that old. But if you don't sit up like this here and you don't stand up straight with your shoulders back and you sit with your shoulders rounded, it's like a negative feedback loop. Because you go like this here and then you interact with someone, they'll treat you like you have bad posture as well. Like people treat each other unconsciously in all these different ways. Like where if someone has poor posture and they're looking up to people, it's versus like walking in, giving a good impression, chest out, giving like a good handshake. The interaction goes a completely different way. And if you have loads of interactions like that where you are made smaller and you are making yourself smaller and like hiding away, that will have a massive impact on your overall, let's say, mental health, or let's say not even mental health, just how you feel. Like just if you want to do this right now, just sit up straight, chest up, shoulders back for like 30 seconds and just see how you feel. And then hide away like this here, make yourself small, chin down especially, and look through your eyebrows like this here and see how you feel. And like one is you genuinely feel like kind of scared and kind of like hidden and kind of like, please don't poke me. And then the other one, you're like, fucking bring it on, which is weird. It's like a weird sort of thing. I don't even know. I don't have the words to even describe it. But your posture and how you embody different positions is very, very important. That's one of the things I thought about with yoga, is that if you embody all these different
I feel like sorry.
Rude.
Sorry.
It's okay. You're excited. Go on, talk about it. Say it. It must be much more important.
I didn't even realize. I thought you were finished. One of the things that I was just thinking like about the posture thing you said, it's like think about all the stuff that like a cat would do unconsciously, like where it like arches its back and like hisses, and like how a dog would but it's like how a dog would cower. Is like all this stuff is like it's, or like when bears like they stand up on two legs, it's like it's all instinctual. Like nobody's like, it's not a conscious thing. It's instinctual. Sorry.
Yeah, it's instinctual. That's exactly what it is. And if you can assess a lot about people by their posture. Now there is other factors as well. But if you're walking around like Groundskeeper Willie, well, actually, yeah, Groundskeeper Willie versus Mr. Burns. I meant Mr. Burns, yeah. But if you walk around like Mr. Burns, you're gonna feel like Mr. Burns. If you walk around like Groundskeeper Willie, you'll feel like Groundskeeper Willie. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I was like a big thing is like if you go into a room and you see someone standing in the corner, like literally out of the way, and then it's like they're standing in the corner and they look brave. It's like, oh, look at that. What would you say? Mysterious and interesting person. And so you look at someone who's in the corner and they're, it's like they're sitting and they're cowering in the corner and they're, look, please don't talk to me. I don't like to be talked to. It's like you can tell.
Sorry, I seen a meme today and it was like me thinking it was like, what was it? The meme was like me thinking I'm just cool and mysterious, but actually I'm just weird and lonely.
And again, that all depends on your posture. So again, if you're sitting in the corner and you have good posture, people will like you. And if you're sitting in the corner and you're slouching, people will think you're weird. I'm joking. In general, yeah, no, you're just right. Like obviously, how you carry yourself will be dictated by your state. Like what state of being are you in? Are you in a high energy state? As I said, like if I said to you, "Oh my goodness, the woman of your dreams just texted you," like you just immediately perk up. If I said, "Oh, you just won the lotto," you're like, "Ah!"
That's, it would be. That feeling there, right? That is you rapidly ascending a hierarchy, like rapidly changing your position, and that's what that excitement is. Yeah, for real, that's exactly what it is. That's when the arms go up. That's
I can't even keep my arms aren't even down there anymore. My arms are up here. If I get my legs up, I would. I see you jumping and skipping, and they lift their feet to the side. They're like, "Get my feet out of there."
Well, that's
so,
exactly what it is. Which is, oh man, people are.
And you get people, and it's like they're delivering news. Like, oh, such and such was just in an accident, and they literally get blown off their feet, and they need to sit down. Or like, I can't even stand.
Smaller.
I literally need to shrink into a ball right now and cry. And again, it's not saying that either one of those things is right or wrong. It's like, again, even if you win the lotto, if someone you love, something tragic happens, the appropriate thing to do is change your state and all this kind of stuff. But in general, if you're not happy with the results that you're getting from your current state, it's like, yeah, you could try and manufacture a different state. Because again, maybe the issue is that it's not that you're depressed. It's not that you're sad. It's not that you're a low energy person. It's not that you're not ambitious or any of this stuff. But it's literally that due to society and the way that we live right now, you are being paid to sit down in a low energy state for hours and hours and hours. And then you go home and then you take that low energy state, the momentum of it. And it's very hard to break habits and, even just mental energy habits. It's like, that's just kind of what you're doing. So postural cues and yoga practice and all this kind of stuff. Like the idea is that you cultivate a good position, a good energy, and good.
Well, actually, here's something that's really cool. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, when you practice yoga, like you're really practicing manipulating your state. You go in, like one of the things, like you leave whatever energy you have off the mat. You go to the mat with a new thing, and you meditate to get yourself into this sort of still thing, and you leave all the other states away, and then you start embodying these different postures. Like one of the big ones, like to inhale, reach up, expand, and then exhale, fold forward. And you go expand and contract and expand and contract, and you start going through that, and then that makes you feel much more, let's say, pliable, or much more like not resilient, but like I can't think of the word, but like if you're branching a tree, if you don't malleable, yeah, but if you don't bend, you break. Do you get me? So it makes you much more easy to bend and go from like this expanded state into the contracted state, and you get better contracting. And you know that after you contract, it will feel good to expand, and after you expand, it will feel good to contract. It's yoga helps you do all that sort of stuff, and I think it's very, really cool. You literally physically embody it.
Yeah, yoga is pretty cool, and again, it kind of fits a lot of the problems that we're talking about today. Because again, if you are just sitting for hours and hours and are trying to fuse and adapt into these positions, well, yoga is a practice that will help you with that. If you're somebody who's just kind of in this low energy state constantly, or just has low endorphins or energy or dopamine or whatever like that, because again, you're kind of stuck and done. It's like, going in and meditating, breaking away, and then also running through this little routine where you go through these highs and these lows and these ebbs and flows. It's like, it's really, really good for you, both mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And there's many practices like that, and obviously you don't have to do yoga. You could cultivate your own sense of, or your own ritual in order to do this, and maybe that's what people should do, because obviously yoga is, I think it's roughly translated into in unity, isn't it? Isn't that kind of what yoga means? It's moving, being in unison with the universe. And so again, maybe for you that doesn't feel very hippy dippy at the minute, but you finding even just a few minutes to sit down and come and reconnect with yourself, and maybe it means sitting down on the floor.
Wait, what do you mean sitting down? It's new smoking.
That's what's going to sitting down on the floor. But again, for you right now, and again, you don't judge. Actually, this is the thing. We were talking about this in the office, and we were talking about people and their logged amount of years. And you guys were kind of nearly coming, and obviously you're probably slagging. It's not a judgment. It's like, listen, we're all victims of society in a sense. That it's like, this is like, until you know better, you can't do any better. And so if you didn't know that sitting was an issue, and also you just were sitting, I was just sitting around, like I just had to sit, like I had to eat my dinner, I had to drive somewhere, I had to go to school. It's like, it's not necessarily like, it's not a judgment call.
Yeah, it's not a judgment call.
Yeah,
I think that is really important, and I think that happens. Something that happens to me a lot if I'm talking to someone, let's say outside of the gym, and like they're asking for some gym advice, wherever it is, like, and I tell them some of the stuff that they're doing wrong. Maybe it's the way I'm saying it, or maybe it's the approach, because I'm so like matter of fact about it. Like they'll take offense to it and they'll think that it's a judgment call. I'm like, in no way is it a judgment call. Like if I'm telling you, oh yeah, that dinner's shit, it's like that's absolute crap nutrition. They'll almost be like personally offended when there's like zero offense meant. Does that make sense?
It's definitely the way you're saying it, Chris. if someone goes, oh, this is what I like to eat for dinner, you go, oh, that dinner's shit. I was
No,
actually
no,
thinking
no,
this.
no, no,
I
no.
was thinking this.
It's not that. They're like, oh, is this good? And I'm like, no, that's terrible. It's like all it is carbs on sugar. It's like
Yeah.
a big bowl of cereal. So it's like,
But objectively, and nutritionally, it's terrible. But it's like actually, like given your lifestyle and your circumstance, your likes and likes, yes, it's an amazing dinner. Good, better,
is it?
best.
You don't even know what the dinner is.
Yeah, I do. Listen, you're having beans on toast with fucking sausages. I know, I ate it. I know what you're eating. And so,
Not that bad.
and then you're having cheesecake for dessert. I'm aware. I know what it's like. So it's like, okay, is that a good dinner? Yes, it's a great dinner, because if you go to Africa to people who are starving and offer that dinner, they will literally take the hand. They're like, this is the greatest food I've ever eaten in my life. And so, it's at the bottom of the barrel in terms of it's literally calories, which is good. And then better would be, okay, how could we improve that? It's like, okay, maybe we could opt for a higher quality of sausage. Maybe you could enter X, Y, or Z into the mix to make, it's like maybe
Some
go for
vegetables.
it's some more fiber, some more vegetables. You can make your beans from scratch.
Some
You have
colours.
tomato beans, fried onion in there, some garlic, whatever. It's like, and maybe a salad on the side, whatever. It is not completely terrible to have whatever it is you like, but the issue is if you know better, well, then you shouldn't need to ask that question. That's not a great dinner because you should be eating X, Y, or Z. But if somebody's generally clueless and you're like, oh, that's shit, they're like, please, let's try my best. It's like, obviously people are going to be offended. But if somebody goes, oh, I had McDonald's for 6 day in a row, is that bad? It's kind of like, well, listen,
you do have
what do
to,
you-
yeah, you do
what,
have
what
to
do
have,
you think? What do you think? That's how I say. What do you think of that dinner? And go, oh yeah, no, I never should be there. Yeah, obviously, all right.
I'm going to use that now so much more. I was like, oh, what do you think of it? Before I give my opinion, and then I can start. Because having a little bit of tact is important, and I do use that. See, when it comes to training sometimes and all that sort of stuff, like I do use it sometimes, and I can be quite.
Oh yeah, I do use it sometimes.
Like, see, but like with the boxing course, like someone throws a jab, like terrible, awful,
terrible,
great.
job.
Like, but they'll eventually do one that is actually great, and they'll get the great for that. And then I feel like if I am that blunt and that, like, I'm just honest and objective about it.
As a coach, I have a flow. Some days I come in and I'm the best friend, and other days I come in and just go, all right, guys, everybody, nobody's moving quick enough. and that works sometimes too, because obviously, again, as a coach, you're trying to achieve different things, and I get where you're coming from. But I'm just saying, like, objectively, if somebody say, oh, what do you think of my dinner? For that shit, and I don't know why they got offended. And it's like, well, it's pretty obvious. What do you think of this coaching situation? Oh, that was shit. Oh, that's terrible coaching. That was me being a terrible coach to a terrible coach. Anyway, so I mean that pretty much wraps it up. I think we've waffled on long enough on why sitting is the new smoking. If you have anything to add, Chris, now would be a good time to kind of.
Sitting is the new smoking, basically because you're in a lower metabolic state. You're basically not burning as much calories as you could be. Most people they're not burning enough calories and they're eating too many calories. You shorten up your hip flexors, which leads to a whole host of other issues that can lead to back pain and all this sort of stuff, which will limit you in the long run. And that's essentially why sitting's so bad for you. But when we say sitting, we don't mean sitting in a deep, perfect squat like the Asian squat or anything like that, or sitting full lotus on a yoga mat. We mean sitting in an office chair, sitting back, chilling like this here, or sitting hunched over your desk like that there, or driving for 4 hours a day up and down the country because you have sales or whatever you have to do.
Would the issue be atrophy? So the issue is that it's like you're not using your hamstrings, you're not using your glutes, you're not using your core muscles to stabilize, you're not using your back muscles. What else was I going to say? You're not extending through your shoulder, you're not extending through your hip, and so obviously it's like, well, if you're not doing all that, it's not about the fact that you're sitting, because again, we can sit. And if you do sit for long periods of time, you can also get away with it. Yeah. If we give you the right prescription, it's not about the fact that you are sitting. It's about what you're not doing in order to compensate for the fact that, you're after spending 8 hours there inactive. So how do we reactivate and rejuvenate the muscles and positions that we care about?
Guys, I think that's time to wrap it up. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell if you're watching us on YouTube. If you listen to us on Spotify, I don't think there's much interaction you can do on that one, and hopefully we will see you in the next one. Tell your friends about it, listen to us on your walks, all that sort of good stuff. Peace, love, and we'll see you in the next one.